Namaskar friends, welcome to the channel JIV and CIV Made Simple. Today we are going to discuss our CCP Certified Credit Professional memory based question and answer for the RPE examination which was held on 14th March 2026. So it consists of numerical questions, theoretical questions. So what are the important topic from your question are being repeatedly asked, we are going to see. And if you have not checked our previous memory based question and answer session, check out the link in the description section. And if you want PDF of such kind of content, you can WhatsApp me on the number shown on the screen. So let's get started with our very first question, which is a numerical one. I request you to have pen, paper and calculator with you. So let's get started. The question is simple, that there is a firm, the name of firm has been given, Phoenix Corp, and their management, they are reviewing the financial position. So current asset they have given $4 lakh, current liability $2 lakh, and CFO want to strategically adjust the company liquidity position to reach a target CR of exactly 1.33. So they have set a target CR. What is that? 1.33. So the question is, right. So the question is, how much additional current liability must the company take on, assuming that current asset remain constant, to arrive at the target ratio of 1.33? And the four options they have provided you. So very basic question. So first of all, you should know what is the current ratio. What is the formula for computing the current ratio? It's very simple. Current ratio is current asset upon current liability, right? It simply means that how much short-term asset company have to as compared to the short-term dues. So current asset means short-term asset, right? So current asset means what? Short-term asset. And current liability means what? Short-term dues, right? So the ratio between short-term asset upon short-term dues is called current ratio. Now let's write down the equation, right? So asset, how much is the asset? So as you can see, asset is $4 lakh. So as you can see here, asset is $4 lakh. Let me show you. This $4 lakh is the current asset, and current liability is 2 lakh. Plus let's suppose that we want to increase the current liability by L. Okay, so what will be the final current liability? So final CL will be, initially it was 2 lakh and add L. So final CL will be 2 lakh plus L. What is the L here? L is the extra liability that company will take. L is the extra liability. Fine. Now just apply the formula. Current asset remaining the same, which is 4 lakh. So our equation will be like this: 4 lakh divided by 2 lakh plus L, and the ratio is 1.33. Just now you have to solve this equation and then you have to get the answer. So you can see now, question are not being asked very tough. Actually it is very easy provided you understand the concept clearly, right? So so this will be how much? 4 lakh, let me write it down, is equal to 1.33 times 2 lakh plus L. And if you simplify it further, so that would give us 2 lakh. No, just wait a minute. So that would be how much? 2,66,000 plus 1.33L is equal to 4 lakh. So from here, 1.33L is equal to 4 lakh minus 2,66,000, which is 1,34,000, and L is 1,34,000 divided by 1.33. So that is near about how much? 1,00751. This is the L, right? So if you look at the option that they have provided, $50,000, no, that's wrong. 1,00752, yes, correct. C is wrong, D is wrong, B is the correct one, right? So you can trick to remember this, right? Divide asset with respect to ratio, you will get the old lamp. You subtract the existing liability, right? So there is a trick. Suppose you don't want to go through the entire formula, so you can use the trick also. What is the trick? See, to find the liability, what you need to do, you write the current asset. In the denominator, you write the target ratio. Current asset divided by target ratio minus existing liability, right? So this is the formula. So directly put the value in the formula, you will get the answer. Suppose they ask you to find how much liability to increase. Just write current asset upon target ratio. Like in this case, current asset is how much? 4 lakh upon target ratio is how much? 1.33. And what is the existing liability? It was, I think, 2 lakh. Just do it and you will get the answer. So no need to go for this equation. Just remember this formula and you can find how much liability has to be increased if suppose same question appear in the upcoming examination. So you can see in every question I am not just going through the option and telling you the correct one. No, I am explaining what is the how we can go about solving it, and also I provide you a trick to remember it. So just you can remember it like this: A upon R minus CL. It is the extra liability. A upon R minus CL. Friends, before continuing to the next question, let me introduce you to our CCP comprehensive course. If you are looking for one-stop solution for your entire CCP examination, you can check out our course. Here you get 12 previous year question, and this is 13th month. Right now we are discussing. Then quizzes and mock tests consisting of 63 tests covering all the 4 modules, which have been placed module wise as well as unit wise. You can practice the test, and this is a time bound test. You can attempt the multiple time. In addition to the mock test, you get unit wise videos on PDF. So there are 37 videos already added, right? So which is present module wise, and each video is of 1 hour duration. So this will help you to have a command over the subject. In addition to that, we provide you PDF also, module wise PDF, quick revision PDF for final revision, and inside each PDF you get separate theory PDF, separate MCQs PDF. So this help you consolidate your concept. So this entire course many aspirants have benefited and cracked the examination in the very first attempt using the course. So you can also get detail, check out the link in the description section, and a special discount is also available on this course, so that this will help you immensely in the upcoming examination. You can also WhatsApp me on the number shown on the screen. This is regarding the SARSAI. You know what is SARSAI? That is the Central Registry of Securitization, Asset and Reconstruction and Security Interest of India. So very good question. The question is, the SARSAI was specifically formed and operate under the provision of which of the following act? Banking Regulation Act, RDDBI Act. This is called RDDBI Act, SARFAESI Act, and Companies Act. Very good question. So first of all, let's go to the background of the question. Let's understand why this SARSAI was created. Why this SARSAI was created? There was a major problem of the bank, that there was fraud going on. What kind of fraud? That same property, right? Same property, and it was mortgaged by different bank. Right, it was being mortgaged by different bank, and it caused a fraud like situation. That's why government has decided to create a central record. Government has decided to create a central record where every mortgage will be registered, right? So this avoid the chance of this fraud happening again, because suppose there is a property, so it get registered on the SARSAI, right? So whenever someone want to avail mortgage against the same property with other bank, the SARSAI forbid them. Why? Because SARSAI record clearly or will show that there is an existing mortgage for this bank against this property, right? So now the question is, which act created SARSAI? So although SARSAI is formed under the Companies Act, right? Although SARSAI is formed under the Companies Act section number 8, but it is also created under the SARFAESI Act, right? It is also created under the SARFAESI Act, chapter number 4. So SARFAESI Act is the law that governs securitization, asset reconstruction and security interest. So that's why under the SARFAESI Act, government has got authority to make the SARSAI. So what is the main purpose of SARSAI? So if someone asks you that, please tell me what is the purpose of the SARSAI. So remember that this is a kind of national database. It is a kind of national database where bank registered their mortgage, and it prevent the fraud. This is a very important thing. It prevent the fraud. Same property, you cannot get multiple loan on the same property. And what is the mandate given in the SARFAESI? Please understand. See, I'm not just explaining the act, I'm explaining something more, so that suppose in the upcoming examination question is asked, you can easily answer. So banking and financial institution get 30 days. How much time they get? They get 30 days for securitization transaction and asset reconstruction and mortgage or security interest. So registering on SARSAI is mandatory, right? So earlier what used to happen, that immovable property were registered in the mortgage only. Now, so earlier this include only, this SARSAI include registering the immovable property only, but now it include movable asset also. It include movable asset also, like vehicle and machinery. it includes intangible asset also. So scope has widened, right? Intangible asset like, receivable, book debt also have been done. So remember, there's a trick. So the correct answer to this question obviously is option number C. So there is a trick you can use to remember it. You can call it like this, that this CERSAI is a registry of CERSAI. Just wait a minute. CERSAI is registry of what? CERSAI is registry of SARFAESI. Fine. So CERSAI registry of security interest, SARFAESI handles security interest. So therefore CERSAI means SARFAESI Act. So CERSAI start with S. SARFAESI start with S. Same family. So remember, CERSAI was created under the SARFAESI Act 2002. Companies Act only give it a company license, not the mandate. So Companies Act only give it what? Company mandate. It give a company license. It give a company license, not the mandate. Purpose is to stop the multiple mortgage fraud and registration of all the security interest within 30 days. This is mandatory. It cover immovable, movable and intangible asset. All of them are covered. Now question number 3. Very good question it is. So friends, the question is regarding a construction firm is bidding for a government infrastructure project. As a part of the tender requirement, the firm approaches its bank to issue a bid bond, bank guarantee of $50,000. The tender document specified that bill validity period is 120 days from the date of technical bid opening. According to the standard banking practice and RBI guideline, which of the following statement is correct regarding the tenure? So this question pertains to two things: tenure and claim period of the bank guarantee. So option number A says that BG must expire exactly on the 120th day and no claim can be made after that date. B says that BG should have validity period covering the bid validity plus an additional claim period, typically 6 to 12 months. C has taken a bid bond guarantee of $50,000, right? And tender says bid validity 120 days. So what is the correct statement? That is the question. So first of all, let's understand what is this bid bond BG. We call it, bid bond bank guarantee. So it is a kind of promise. It is a kind of promise. So which is given by the bank. It is a kind of promise that bank give to the government department, right? That if bidder go away, then bill can be withdrawn. Or suppose that bill is withdrawn. Suppose he does not sign the contract. If bidder goes away, he does not sign the contract, or if any unforeseen circumstance happen, then bank will reimburse the government. That's why BG validity period is equal to the complete tender process period, right? And 2 days always exist in bank guarantee. What are the 2 dates? What are the important 2 dates that always exist in bank guarantee? First is the validity period. So when I say validity period, what does it mean? It means that period in which bidder is bounded. That is called tender bill validity period. This is the tender bid validity period, and in this case it is 120 days. I think in the question they have mentioned you, as you can see, they have given exactly that the tender document specifies the bill validity period is 120 days. So this is the first period, which is always mentioned in any kind of bid. And the second period is called claim period. Second period is called claim period. You know what happened here? That after the completion of the validity, beneficiary is given some time, that if any default happened during the valid period, then file your claim. So after the end of the validity period, suppose validity period has ended, so the beneficiary, which is the government in this case, he is given certain time, that if any default happened during the validity period, then they can claim their file. That is the point. Claim period. And generally it is 6 to 12 months. Generally it is 6 to 12 months, right? So IBA and banking practice, according, claim period allowing is mandatory as per IBA and banking practice. Why claim period is necessary? Because if claim period is not there, then beneficiary will not be able to default notice process the default notice. And about Contract Act, BG is legally enforceable. According to the Contract Act, BG can become legally unenforceable. And court sometimes call it unfair extinguishment, right? That's why validity plus claim period दोनों ही both are there, right? So let's look at the option that they have provided. If you look at the option number A, it says that BG must expire on the 120th day and no claim can be made after that date. No, that's wrong. Option B says that that BG should have a validity period covering the how much? So BG should have validity period covering the bid validity and additional claim period. Exactly, B number is correct, because bid validity, that is 120 day, this must be fully covered, and plus after that beneficiary also get a claim period, extra days for claim period. And banking industry, usually it is for 6 to 12 months in the banking industry. And what about option C? It says that BG for bid bond cannot exceed 3 months. No, that's wrong. No such rule is there. BG validity is according to the tender requirement, right? And last option is claim period is optional. No, this is not an optional, right? Please remember, banking law plus IBA, as per the guidelines of the banking law and IBA, right, it is mandatory, it is not an optional. Please understand. I hope it is crystal clear now. So remember, the trick to remember the concept that we learn in this question is very simple. You can remember it like this, that whenever you see this bid, think of the validity plus the claim. Okay, so valid means bill validity period and claim means extra 6 to 12 months, right? So what we learn from this discussion is that, BG bond, bid bond bank guarantee cover bidder commitment during the tender stage, and BG has two period. One is called validity period, other is called the claim period. Claim period typically ranges from 6 to 12 months, issued as per RBI, IBA guidelines, and claim period is mandatory, is not optional. Now let's look at the next question. Very good question it is, regarding the payback period. Question that the investment committee of a firm is evaluating two projects using the payback period method. What is the name of method? Payback period method. So two projects they have given. Project A, payback period of 3 years. Project B, payback period of 4 years. And one junior analyst suggests that payback period is the most foolproof method. So the question is, which is one of the following is not a drawback of the payback? This is the very good question. Lot of time I have seen they are asking you about payback period, about some other methods are there for the investment decision. So they will ask you what are the drawback, what are not the drawback. So which is not a drawback, that is what they are asking. It ignored the time value of money. It failed to consider the cash flow that occur after the payback point is reached. It is difficult to calculate and understand for non-finance manager. It does not measure the total profitability or net present value of a project. So which is not a drawback? That's the question, right? So payback period method is a very simple tool, right? In which what we see, in which just we observe that in how many year we are able to recover the investment. In how many year we are able to recover the investment. That is what we see in the case of payback period. Fine. But with this simplicity, there are major limitations. It also come. So in this particular question, we have to choose those options which is not a limitation, right? Which is not a limitation. That is what we have to choose, right? So let's look at the option. Option number A, if we talk about, it says that it ignores the time value of money. So remember, so payback period assume that that whatever amount we get today is equal to whatever amount we get in the future. This is an incorrect assumption. For example, suppose year 1 $100 and year 4 $100, they have been treated like a same. This is a major flaw. This is a major drawback. It does not take time value of money into consideration. Yes, this is the major drawback. So option number A is wrong, right? This is the drawback. We have to choose which is not a drawback. Option number B, if you look at, it says that it failed to consider cash flow that occur after payback. Suppose there are two projects. Let's say project X and project number Y. So suppose project X 2-year payback and project Y 3-year payback, and after that 10 year massive profit happen. Fine. So payback period will tell that okay, this X is better because you are able to get your recover the investment within 2 years. But project Y, although the payback period is 3 years, but for the next 10 years it give you massive profit. So payback period will tell you that X is better, but even though Y is much more profitable, because after payback period we are getting massive profit, right? So that's why option B is also wrong, because yes, this is also a limitation. it ignore any kind of cash flow that may happen after the payback point is reached. Now, if you look at the option number C, it is difficult to calculate, understand for non-finance manager. See, this is wrong. This is wrong, and this is the correct answer because it is very easy. This is not a limitation. It is very easy, right? So manager has just have to apply the simple logic that in how many years we are going to recover the money back. That's it. That the simplicity is the strength of the payback period. So this is wrong, and this is our correct answer. What about option D? That profitability or NPV does not measure. Yes, correct. Payback only tell you when you will get your money back, but it does not tell you anything about how much money you make from the project, whether wealth will be created, whether wealth will be destroyed, how much will be the long-term return, nothing. That's why payback period is not profitability measure. This is one of the major limitation of the payback period. So yes, it is a limitation. This is a limitation, not the correct answer. So payback period tells you nothing about the profitability. Please understand. So remember, what we learned from this discussion is that, payback means fast, but blind. Fast but blind. So when I say fast, what does it mean? It means, simple and quick. Fast means simple plus quick. And blind means what? It does not see TVM, time value of money, nothing. It does not see profit. So that's why it is blind. And it does not see NPV, nothing. It only check how much time it will take to recover the amount. So what we learned from the discussion is that payback is the simplest method. So an option C is a strength, not a drawback. It ignores TVM. It ignores the cash flow after the payback, and profitability and NPV is also ignored. So I hope it is crystal clear. And this particular table clearly compare the payback and NPV, right? So you can go through them. Now the next question we have is a very good question. It's tell you that SWOT analysis. You might have heard the name of this term, so-called SWOT analysis. So the strategic planning department of a lending commercial bank is conducting a SWOT analysis. So basically the question is, which of the following factor would be classified as an internal parameter, a strength or weakness for the bank? So bank has identified 4 factors while doing the SWOT analysis. So which factor is strictly so the question is, which of the following factor would be classified strictly as internal parameter or the strength or weakness for the bank? Option they have given: an increase in RBI repo rate leading to higher borrowing cost. B says higher percentage of gross NPA in the bank retail loan portfolio. C says entry of a new aggressive fintech competitor. And D says favorable demographic shift leading to an increase in the young tech savvy population. So I think the formula of SWOT very easily, right? You know it very well, that SWOT. So SW means strength and weakness, and OT means what? Opportunity and threat. Fine. So but remember the basic rule that internal means whatever is control of the bank, external means whatever bank out of the control of the bank, right? So if you look at the option, right, so basically here talking about the internal control. Option they have given increase in the RBI repo rate leading to higher borrowing cost, and higher percentage of the gross NPA in the bank retail loan portfolio. Entry of a new aggressive fintech competitor offering zero balance account. Favorable demographic shift leading to an increasing young tech savvy population. So we have to choose which option is internal parameter, right? So if you look at the option means what are the things that are under control of a bank. So if you look at option number A, right, they say RBI repo rate increase. So tell me, repo rate is decided by RBI. So bank has no control over it. So this is not an internal parameter. Option A is wrong. If you look at option number B, high percentage of the gross NPA. Yes, you know about gross NPA, right? So obviously gross NPA is the result of the self process of the bank. For example, it may be because of weak credit appraisal. Yes, gross NPA have risen. It may be because of weak credit appraisal, or it may be because of slow recovery process, or it may be because of no proper monitoring, non-proper monitoring, right? So all these things, these are related to the internal system of the bank. All these things are related to the internal system of bank, right? That's why NPA level is a kind of internal weakness. It is a kind of internal weakness. That's why if you look at the option number B, yes, this is the correct one. This is the correct internal parameter. What about option C? So it says new fintech competitor. See, suppose a new market player, new player come in the market. So that's not in the control of the bank. So this is not an internal parameter. What about D? It says demographic shift. So basically more young tech-savvy population. Again, population trend. This is a part of social environment. Bank cannot control it. So this is an external opportunity. So internal means inside job. So whatever can happen inside the bank, that's called internal. But this NPA, this is the part of internal. Because of the bank mistake, this NPA has risen. But the repo rate, competition, demography, these are the external factor. So remember, SWOT, that is called strength, weakness, opportunity, threat, right? It includes a strength. So internal factor include a strength plus weakness. So these two things comes under the internal factor. And NPA are internal, repo rate, competitor, demography, these are the external factor. Just now I told you, SWOT. Strength, weakness, internal, opportunity, threat is external. So question may be asked that what are the things under external factor? So opportunities and threat are external, and strength and weakness are internal factor. So this is a combination of internal and external factor. Now friends, let's do one numerical based question. So I told you earlier that this session is a blend of numerical question as well as theoretical question. So the question is a balance sheet of a Zenith Textile Limited. They have provided you that equity share capital $5 lakh, reserve and surplus $2 lakh, goodwill $50,000, patent and trademark $30,000, preliminary expense $20,000, total debt $8 lakh. So you have to compute the T and W, total net worth. Very good question. 4 options has been provided. So first of all, let's understand what is the basic logic of this T and W. Right? What does it mean? Right? Let's understand. Let's clarify T and W. So T and W shows the real worth of the company. It shows the real worth of a company, right? So in which any kind of unreal or any kind of invisible items get eliminated. Any kind of unreal and invisible item gets eliminated. That means when I say real money, real item, it includes share capital, it includes reserves, right? And what are the unreal items? So unreal item are deducted. It includes intangible asset, any kind of intangible asset that you cannot touch, that's called intangible asset, that has to be eliminated. In addition to that, any kind of fictitious asset that has to be eliminated. So T and W tells us if the company if the company stop working, so how much money can we recover, right? If the company liquidate, how much money can we recover? That is what total tangible net worth tells us. So this is the real worth of a company, share capital plus reserves. It excludes intangible asset and fictitious asset. So the formula is very simple. Share capital plus reserve, add both of them, and you subtract any kind of intangible plus fictitious asset. And this is equal to what? This is equal to T and W, tangible net worth. So now let's come back to the question. So what data they have provided? So as you can see, they have provided the equity share capital is equal to $5 lakh. So let's compute the net worth, which is the equity. So it includes this $5 lakh plus reserves and surplus, which is $2 lakh. So this is the net worth. So the total will become 7 lakh. Now how much is the intangible asset? Yes, this goodwill, this patent and trademark, right? These are the intangible asset. So these two are the intangible one. So I request you to please compute it on your own first and then see the explanation. Why I am saying so? Because this way you can check out your mistake. Suppose in the upcoming examination you get the same question, and if you do little bit silly mistake, obviously it is a kind of time waste and money waste. So I request you to please try it on your own. Right? Not do the mistake. Don't do the mistake in the examination. Right? Please listen to my advice and follow it, and you will be beneficial. Right? So friends, goodwill and patent, these are intangible asset. Right? These are intangible asset. So combine both of them, 50,000 and 30,000. That will give you $80,000. So this is the total intangible. And how much is the fictitious asset? So this preliminary expense, which is not been written off, this is a kind of fictitious asset, right? Why? Because they have no realizable value. NRV, no realizable value. So now let's jot down into the formula. So T and W is equal to, just add this 5 lakh plus 2 lakh, which is 7 lakh. 7 lakh. Subtract the intangible, 80,000, and also we need to subtract this preliminary expense, which is 20,000. So that gives you 6 lakh as the correct answer. Right, option number I think C is correct. So what we learned from the discussion is that T and W means net worth minus not real worth. Net worth means share capital plus reserve. These two include net worth, and not real worth include intangible asset and fictitious asset, right? So when I say how can you identify the not real worth, so think of it like this. Suppose you sell such kind of item. If you're not able to get cash, that gives you the non real worth. So you have to subtract the not real worth from the real worth to get the tangible net worth. So remember, T&W remove any kind of intangible or fictitious asset, and debt is not a part of the T&W formula, right? Preliminary expense is a kind of fictitious asset. So in this case, we get T&W is equal to how much? $6 lakh, as you can see. Now friends, very good question in front of you. Let's have a look. So this question pertains to, let me show you. Yes, very good question. EPS computation. Let's see. So friends, you have to compute EPS, that is earning per share, for the Beta Logistics Limited, and data for March ending 2026 had been given, right? That PAT, profit after tax, they have given 12 lakh, and 1% cumulative preference share capital, they have given 10 lakh. Face value is $100 per share. Everything is given in dollar. Number of equity share outstanding $2 lakh. Corporate tax rate 25%. You have to compute EPS for the equity shareholder of the company, and 4 options have been given. See, what is the meaning of EPS? Let's understand. Earning per share. So how much profit does one equity share get? That's called earning per share, right? So how much profit does one equity share get? So we have an equity share, right? So how much profit does it get? That is what we call EPS. But equity shareholder get profit at the last. I think it very well that any kind of equity shareholder, they get profit at last, at the end. First right goes to the preference shareholder. Initially, preference shareholder get the right? So the formula for EPS is very simple. Let me write it down. EPS formula is like this. What's the formula? So it says that profit after tax, you subtract the preference dividend. So preference dividend has to be subtracted, because the first and foremost preference is given to the preferential dividend, and divided by the number of equity share. That means earning per share. How much you are able to earn per share? How much profit you have to make? Now PAT they have already provided. So how much PAT it is? I think it is $12 lakh. Yes, $12 lakh. Now how to compute the preference dividend? Yes, preferential shareholder get a fixed dividend, that is 1% on their capital. So 1% of this, I think 10 lakh, which is 10,000. So this is the preference dividend, 10,000. Because they have given 1% cumulative preference share capital. Yes, that is the 10,000. And now how much earning is available to equity shareholder? Very simple. Out of this 12 lakh, subtract this 1% cumulative preference share capital, right? So I think yes, 1% of 10 lakh is 10,000. So subtract this, I think 12 lakh minus 10,000, because this 10,000 go to the preferential shareholder. That will give you 11,90,000. Now this much is available for equity earning. Now you need to subtract it. You need to divide it with respect to number of equity shareholders, equity share outstanding. That is 2 lakh equity share. So just do the calculation. 11,90,000 divided by 2 lakh. So I think that will give you earning per share equal to $5.95, right? So if you look at the option, the closest option is, I think how much? Let me show you. The closest option is 5.50, right? That's the point. So I think this is the easiest way to compute the earning per share. Now let's have a look at the next question. This question pertains to SLBC. That's called a standby letter of credit. Friend, if you really think that this video is adding value to your preparation, please hit the like button. This will motivate me to make more such content. Now the question is all about global trader which is an exporter. Global trader is an exporter and a star retailer is an importer. They have entered into a contract. The star retailer provider as SBLC, right, a standby letter of credit to global creditor through their bank. So importer provide SBLC to the exporter through the bank, and parties have agreed to payment on account basis for the actual trade. So in the context of the international trade finance, which of the following statement best describe the fundamental characteristics and all aspect functionality of the SBLC. Option A says, it is a primary payment mechanism where the bank pay the exporter as soon as shipping documents are presented, regardless of a buyer financial state. It is a secondary payment mechanism that is intended to be drawn upon only if the applicant or importer default on their contractual payment obligation. Option C, it is governed solely by UCPDC 600 and cannot be issued under the ISP 98 framework. D, it is a non-fund based limit that automatically convert to a term loan for the beneficiary if documents are not submitted within 21 days. Very good question. So let me explain you in the layman term what is SBLC all about. See, SBLC you can think of like a kind of safety guarantee. You can think of it like a kind of safety guarantee. It is not meant to be used in normal condition. They are not used in the normal condition. It is used only when something goes wrong. So in this question, as you can see, who is the exporter? Exporter is the global traders, as you can see. Global trader is an exporter. Importer is the stall retailer. Importer bank issues an SBLC. So payment term also they have given open account. Let me highlight all these points. Payment term open account, global trader exporter, star retailer importer. Right. So SBLC act like saying that if my buyer does not pay you, my bank will pay you. Right. Suppose my buyer does not pay you, my bank will pay you. So it is a kind of secondary payment mechanism. It is a kind of backup. It's kind of fail safe or plan B. So if you look at the option number 8, it says that primary payment mechanism. So actually it describe correct. So bank only pay if the buyer fail, right? And it is a default based instrument. I clearly told you it is a kind of default based instrument. So now option number C, it says that it is governed by UCPDC 600 and cannot be issued under ISP 98. So B is correct. What about option number C? What do you think? See, as SBLC can be issued under ISP 98 and it can also be, it is the most common way of issuing SBLC, ISP 98 and UCPDC also allowed, right? So we cannot say that solely, so here they have mentioned solely by UCPDC 600. This is incorrect. And what about option D? So it says that it is a non-fund based limit. So no, there is no automatic term loan conversion rule. So it says that automatically convert to term loan. No, there is no such rule. So now in this particular table, what I have done, I have clearly differentiated between these two. You can see on the basis of intention, commercial LC to be used as the primary payment mode and a standby LC to be used as a backup. And trigger. So trigger point for commercial LC is the presentation of the shipping document, while the standby LC it is a presentation of a statement of default. And this commercial LC is common in global common trade, and this is the SBLC is used in service contract and security bids. Governing law is UCPDC 600 and here ISP 98. Right, please note it down. Now we are moving toward a very good question, right? So one trick to remember this SBLC concept like this. Let me write down the trick here. So you can remember it like this. SBLC is a kind of a standby. It is a kind of a standby mode. Right, you might have seen a UPS, right? So it's kind of a standby mode like a UPS. Just like UPS power your computer only when electricity fail. Similarly, SBLC pay only when the buyer fail, right? So UPS use only on failure. So SBLC use only on default. That's the difference. Now, very good question in front of you. That's regarding the running account facility. So friends, basically, packing credit, the question says that, a high performing export house in Mumbai has been granted a running account facility. Also in short, we call it RAF, right? So which of the following statement is correct regarding the eligibility and then the operational guidelines of the running account facility for packing credit? Option A, the facility allow the exporter to avail packing credit even without producing a specific letter of credit or order from export order. B say sub-supplier are eligible to avail the running account facility. C says exporter must produce the specific export order within 90 days from the date of the first draw. D say the facility is mandatory for all the first time exporter to help them build a credit history. See, let me explain how the packing credit works like. So you know it very well that packing credit work like this. What happened in the case of packing credit? Let me explain. So packing credit work like this, that exporter get a loan only when they sow. Suppose this is our exporter, right? So when they get loan only when they show an export order, they show an firm export order, or they show a letter of credit. But for high performing exporter, the bank giving a special privilege. Suppose there is a high performing exporter. So for high performing exporter, bank give a special privilege, and that is called, running account facility. Under this, exporter can take packing credit first and shows the export order later. So under this, what happened? Packing credit first and export order later. So in general way, what happened? First of all, export order, exporter get loan only when they show the export order or letter of credit to the bank. But for high performing exposure, the bank give a special privilege to them. Okay, so they can take packing credit first and then export order later. So this helps a smooth working capital cycle where raw material must be purchased before order are finalized. So if you look at the option that they have provided, so option number A says that the facility allow exporter to avail packing credit even without, yes, correct. This is the peculiarity of the running account facility. So those exporter who have a good reputation, who are high performing, for them bank give them a special privilege. If you look at the option number B, it says sub-supplier are eligible. No. Sub-supplier cannot get this running account facility. They can only get normal packing credit against inland LC. So they have to produce inland LC or purchase order from the main exporter. Then only they will get the, this facility of called packing credit facility. If you look at the option C, so there is no fixed rule like 90 days. The bank decide the timeline based on the exporter cycle, nature of the good, production timeline. And option C is that this is mandatory. No, it's not mandatory. It is privilege offered only to established exporter within 2 to 3 years of good track record with clean credit history. So you may remember this RAF like this, that reverse approval facility. Reverse approval facility. What does it mean? Because in normal packing credit, it says that you show the order first and then I will in the normal case, it shows that you show the order first, you show me the order first and then take money later. This is what say in the normal packing credit, normal PC. But what happened in the case of RAF? In the case of RAF, it shows take money first. It says that take money first and then show order later. Show order later. That is how it works. Right. So running account means receive fund ahead of the order. So pre-shipment finance, it is a kind of pre-shipment finance without immediate export order, and it is only for reliable and established exporter. Sub-supplier are not eligible. Please note this down. These are the peculiarities of the running account facility. Now last question of today's session. So I think this is the easiest question, and this has been asked in the previous examination. So what happened? The question is according to the FEMA Act and RBI guideline, what is the maximum permissible timeline for realization and repatriation of the full export value of the goods? Which kind of good? Warehouse export established abroad in Dubai, right? So suppose there is an Indian exporter, they dispatch a consignment of high-end garment to its own warehouse which is established in Dubai, right, to facilitate the just-in-time delivery. So what is the maximum permissible timeline for the realization and repatriation of the full export value? 9 months, 12 months, 15 months, 6 months? Very good question. So normally when an exporter in India, suppose there is an exporter in India, right? So when he shipped the goods abroad, the money must come back to the India. So the money must come back to the India within 9 months. This 9 months is the standard rule. This 9 months is the standard rule set by the FEMA. But in this case, the garment are not sold to the buyer, right? There is no buyer in the overseas. Garment is not sold to the buyer. But what is happening? They are sent to a warehouse. Where is the warehouse located? Warehouse located in Dubai, right? Warehouse located in Dubai. They are simply sent to an exporter own warehouse in Dubai. So this means that there is no final buyer yet. No final buyer. No invoice raised to the end customer. Goods are waiting in warehouse for just-in-time delivery. So RBI gives some extra time. How much extra time? 15 months. Yes. C is the correct one. Yes, this is the correct one. So RBI allow 15 months because for what? For getting the money back, for realization, repatriation of the export value. So RBI allow 15 months because the exporter need time. Yes, exporter will need certainly some time. For what? Exporter will need some time to stock the goods, to sell them to the local retailer, to collect the sale proceed, to repatriate the foreign exchange back to India. So the timeline is 15 months from the date of shipment, right? So if you look at the other option, that's wrong. Option number C is correct. That is 15 months. Friends, we have more questions available which we have collected. So if you want me to explain those two, right, those also, then you can I have explained them clearly in our paid course. You can check out the paid course in which everything have been explained in a very clear fashion. Or for more detail, you can WhatsApp me on this particular number. Please subscribe the channel and hit the bell icon. Whenever I upload a video, this will give you instant notification. Also, you can join our Telegram channel for CCP, where we conduct quizzes, where we post any update related to the examination. The link